So, education, what I think, how it can be improved. Well, sure. Um, I don't have a complete solution, but the the outreach in a certain format has taught me and exposed me to certain aspects. I'll give the United States as an example. Back in the 1800s and so forth, if you had grade 5, you were educated. It was difficult for people to have grade 2. Education was completely unaffordable for people. So from internship, due to the mass production of goods and so forth, a skill became a priority. So education also started to become a priority in societies. The value was seen, and nowadays the things you notice that everybody notices is how the system hasn't changed. And I'm not just talking about the grading system, no. I'm talking about the value of education in terms of evaluating a child or a teenager's potential, so that they aren't confused and focused on a career that will give them a good life in terms of economic capacity, as opposed to a career that will give them a good life in terms of having a good life, being happy, of course, having that balance, and that ambition. For example, not everybody can be a entrepreneur. I know this for a fact because I helped the dodo head, and you know it it's I'm not insulting in that term, but the approach to business just showed me the bad approach that most people take. I mean, for example, they are tenderpreneurs, right? Well, they are also candlepreneurs. Candlepreneurs, um, these are the folks that will buy the cars from Toyota, put on a markup, shipping and all of that, and then sell it and then get their profit. Hey, Roger gave you an example, didn't you get it? So, education focused on the learner is education that's slightly obstructed. I've seen this with younger kids, my nephews, where they master smart TV within 5-10 minutes, a tablet. Even my younger niece, who's still a baby, can swipe on a tablet. And this just shows that this different approach of how they can be tools of learning. For example, the internet. I'm a case myself. I studied a lot online. I attended a lot of classes online. I did a lot of courses online, and I read tons of books, e-books, audiobooks. There was a time where I would spend 21 hours for 7 days, mostly just reading, researching, listening, and so forth. Um, you could say I'm a curious mind, um, but I think since it started with Wattpad when I was in grade 10, that's when I started to read books on my cellular phone. And it exposed me to a different way of learning, as well as different concepts of how people structure, language and subjects and so forth. I had an interesting book which helped me a lot with mathematics. At first I was like, ugh, math. And if I had a challenge, I would most definitely go for it. If it's a very difficult um if it's a very difficult numerical problem, I'd go for it just because it's a challenge. But this book taught the history of mathematics, which I think is important. The history of mathematics. Why do you need mathematics? Well, mathematics started with battering. Mathematics started with 1 to 9. There was no 0. Why are there negative numbers? This was due to credit. If you owe somebody money, what are you? You're in deficit. And so negative numbers were created. And this evolved eventually. Now we have negative temperatures, we have all of that. But it keeps on evolving, it keeps on going. And it's not too much to take in. It's the format in which it's presented that really matters. Why do you need division? How did division start? And all of that has its history, and it correlates with the brain, because your brain remembers stories better, and then it can connect that with how the children in turn learn. Children love stories. Well, what about stories that give a foundation of mathematics in a very interesting manner, right? And we look at the learners, and like I said, I saw my younger nephews learning fast through these means of technology and so forth, and playing games. This does help with things like coordination and all of that, but not all of it is useful, right? But if you teach the teacher to be versed in these new technologies, so that they are not alien. You don't want the teacher to seem like they are ancient, and the learners are these technological zombies. No, you want the teacher to understand. And this is why you see younger teachers who are more technological, who supposedly spend too much time on their phones, tablets and all of that, and don't really teach. Well, that is because teaching formats haven't adapted technology. They are still analog, and the tests have been done. And the question was how to make kids more interested in learning. Should we give them diagrams, illustrations? And okay, they like tablets. Okay, give them tablets, and then put all of the textbooks in the tablets. That is basically taking that old model and basically just putting it there again. The interactive books, I understand, they are way better. But the teacher needs to be versed in a new kind of teaching, and that is teaching by illustrating. For example, if kids use tablets, and the teacher's tablet is connected to all of the kids' tablets, and as the teacher teaches, they can give examples and illustrations, and they appear on the tablet. And they can also network. The connection from teachers to teachers in different formats and ways of teaching is important. You want teachers that can teach and also learn. For example, if you have a professor teaching 12th grade, a professor in, let's say, mathematics, it seems demeaning, but it's also a very big step up, and it shows the seriousness of teaching, right? That someone of that caliber would teach a foundation, and of course they can simplify it because they understand the core nature of it, right? So the curriculum standards are low, and they are low based on class. And that's why I said if you had grade 5, you were seen as lucky. Education was meant for the privileged. We see this. Richer people have more access to good quality education than people who are not as advantaged. And that is not by mistake. It's class. It's class impeding upon the model of old style education. It's basically just been replicated. Access has been made more available, but there hasn't been a social research models that would sort of show why is it that well-off students do better than those who are disadvantaged. And a lot of times it has to do with worry, worrying about their futures. It has to do with what's going on at home. And then you have the introduction of social workers in school as if they are going to fix the problem, and that's not it. Looking for the brightest in the classroom is a classic mistake most teachers make. And sometimes the brightest isn't the brightest. Some kids get bored. There are kids that are so smart that they literally get bored. There are kids with ADHD, we know today, who have a very low concentration level. And all of these things have to be taken into consideration. And the pace at which education is going is really slow, while the pace of technology is really fast. So now you have two worlds, and one of the classic mistakes is, where do we find them? Okay, let's find them on their Facebook, let's find them on their Instagram, let's find them on their... That divisive thought pattern is bad, and it's why I say you're as old as you feel. Old doesn't always mean wise. It doesn't always mean knowledgeable and smart. So instead of seeing younger generation and so forth as the other, trying to understand what they do, how they do it, why they are so interested, means you become a part of the flock. When you're part of the flock, it makes things easier. It's understood much better, right? So there are teaching models and technicalities to this, and obviously most tech companies have their own vested interest, where maybe they want to promote their product, or they think their product is the answer. um, but is it really to find a solution, integrate teaching, which is what, you know, for, yeah, I think a good example are WhatsApp groups. There are lots of WhatsApp groups made, but nowadays there are WhatsApp study groups where learners who are far from each other can interact. They can interact, ask each other questions, remind each other of stuff, help each other. It's studying, group studying from a distance, and the lecturer can then see, okay, these learners are suffering in this department, and I can help with this, and so forth. And the task team of teachers is also low. Um, it's not seen as one of the most important um, jobs. We all know that. Um, but let's not forget there are levels to teaching. There's, kindergarten, and then there's the start of grade school, and then you go up. The most important is the foundation, kindergarten, and the start of grade school, primary school. Those are the most important. That's where you identify the learning curve, how it's going, how it should be, and it's how you pinpoint problems and find solutions for them. But it has to be done on a general level. There can only be two variables. I think having more than two variables is just um, it 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 it's too big of a margin of error for me, right? Having more than two variables is just, you know um it's true, false, or all are false, or all are true. I don't believe in that. I think you have two variables. One is the solution, the second one could be the patch up, or one is the patch up, the second one is the solution. But you have to get to that point where you have a model where the margin of error is so low, as low as it can be. And it is about exposure. But what are we seeing today? I remember, I don't know, they stopped with the $10 laptop, I think. And mostly why it didn't work out so well is because of internet access. um, you can give them laptops and they have software, but is the software being updated in accordance to the research and development? And I'm no fool. I know some companies invest more, or some foundations are more in places where their companies have a vested interest, right? I understand that, which is why um, I am more pro independent foundations. I think foundations that have ties, you know, are not only susceptible to bias. I think the margin of error with them is too high, and that's because the expectation is too high, because it's tied to the company's reputation. I understand that, and those are some of the obstacles that need to be overcome. um, I still believe it's the way to go. I still believe it's uh, an inevitable future, and a lot of apps, software, software programs is being designed by the so-called young generation, um, who understand the demographic much better, uh, even though our opinions are sometimes taken for granted because experience. And experience isn't always a sign of learning. You can have an experience and walk away with nothing and only reflect on it when you're 90. um, I can give a lot of historical figures who've had to that type of uh, transformation in their lives, but I would rather do away with um, setting a demographic of the young people and then the middle age and then the old people, because at the end of the day, these advancements, they are bridging the gap. They really are bridging the gap. And people that were young 70 years ago aren't young today, but 70 years ago they had completely different views with the people that were older than them at that time. So that's something to learn from, I think. And if people don't learn from that, then it's a miscalculation on their part. um yeah, I want to talk more about education. I'd like to know, uh, what are the thoughts on how education can be innovated, because it's about time. So, we, yeah, let's